Ladies and gentlemen, this is All Things Pro Wrestling with your host, Danny Harrell, and my co-host,
Mike Larkin, host of On the Mic with Mike and contributor to CCW Capital Championship Wrestling.
ladies and gentlemen, we've made it to episode 10. I remember when we started this at episode 1. I can't believe we're here. What a better guest to have today than the one and only Bobby Fish. Bobby, welcome.
Thank you, gentlemen. I am humbled to be number 10 on your 10's a good number. You guys are getting into your flow and feeling the groove, and yeah, there's no better time for me to be on than right now.
Well, we're excited to have you on. Michael,
All right.
go ahead.
So, Bobby, let's start with this because what I love about it, too, is as well, I'm a kid that grew up in the 2000s. I'm a 90s baby. When you think of the independent professional wrestling scene, as a Long Islander, you think of the New York Wrestling Connection. There's Jersey All Pro Wrestling, rest in peace, Fat Frank. But one of the ones I really was a fan of that I got to see really live in person as well, besides those, was NWA Cyberspace. And I wanted to hit you with this because you, Bobby Fish, I remember seeing your match with one Rob Echoes, who would later go on to be Robbie E., and now we know him as Robert Stone in NXT.
Yeah.
Robbie around this time, I believe, is also teaming with Matt Stryker, who we would see, and a gentleman by the name of Billy Bax. But you got to face him under the NWA Cyberspace banner. Talk about what it was like to see work with Robbie and where he has progressed now, because he, doing the manager thing, has really developed his own character.
Yeah. Robbie, way back then, was awesome to work with, and we knew each other from the Northeast, like you said, anyway. So we we're very comfortable. I think we might have done like a dark for Impact back in the day too, around this time. So Rob and I knew each other very well. I think our chemistry was easy. Neither one of us did anything super crazy. Not the luchador, but just in terms of moveset and whatnot. But Rob at that time, I think, was still finding himself just like I was. And Rob was doing like the I don't know if it was the club kid or the DJ thing, or it was, but we were both definitely trying to find ourselves. And Rob had not even scratched the surface of his comedic timing and his just ability to like wear the egg on his face, so to speak. And I think that that's really where Rob now has found just a groove and become a one of one. Like, I don't think there's another Robert Stone out there. I truly don't. I think it's like Santino Marella. Santino was one of one, but nobody. And wrestling is about emotion, and the emotion doesn't always have to be anger or disappointment. It like laughter is another emotion. And I think that that's what Rob has perfected and does so damn well. And then everybody forgets, like, underneath the suits and whatnot, like, dude's still pretty jacked and a hell of an athlete, and he can bump his ass off. So don't sleep on Rob.
Can attest to that because I remember when he was in Impact at the time doing the Robbie E gimmick. Like, for those who have not seen him in person, like Bobby just said, very jacked, really fit the Jersey Show mold, and ran with that character. That tenure was so good. But yeah, like you mentioned, I think with the sky's the limit from him, and much like yourself, I have to equate it to him. Another one with such knowledge that he really took in the tutelage. So I have to give him kudos on that too, because that's what it's about. Knowledge is power.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's finding like your lane and your speed and your thing in this industry. And part of that is learning how that coincides with you growing and getting older, not just in age, but getting older from a standpoint of like, time in the business and what you want out of it, and where you're content, or not even content, but just happy. Like the things you want to sink your teeth into. When you're a kid, you want to be Hulk Hogan. You want to be Rick, you want to be Shawn Michaels. You want to be world champion. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And there's everything right with it. But there's a maturation that I believe happens in this industry, where when you've been in it long enough, that might be where you go, and it might not. And if it's not, like, there's way more to this industry than being, world champion. Like there really, really is. Because at the end of the day, and I'm not telling anybody anything that they don't know, but I just put it this way. Like I've had in my life, I've been fortunate enough to have athletic success in a lot of different things. I've had losses too. I've gotten my ass kicked, whether it be football or it be kickboxing or whatever it is. But I just think that sometimes this business, it can be enjoyed in a lot of ways. There's not just one flavor of ice cream here. So, find your flavor and eat that as often as possible.
I think to equate with what you said there and what I love about the variety of different styles of wrestling and different genres of it, I think that also can attest to many other ways you could do wrestling, whether it be commentary, announcing, being a producer, being an agent. Everybody has their place in there that really helps the superstars get better, not just studying the knowledge, but I think that's the most important thing that really goes into it. There's every moving part, but you can learn something from everyone. And like with professional wrestling, learning is everything and adaptation is key.
100%, 100%. I think the best quality that you can have, or if you don't have it, develop is just if you try to make everyone else better around you, like by default, you will get where you want to go. It'll almost manifest itself if you don't focus solely on you. And like, I'm a spiritual man. I'm a Christian. So like, I don't want to get this, thing in a biblical direction, but like, doing for the people around you and being that is gonna lead you down a road of success a lot quicker than being a selfish prick and politicking your ass off in the locker room to whomever you feel is pulling the strings. And at the end of the day, I think it all comes out in the wash. Like God, it's up to him. It's not on us.
I think we all are.
It's
I'm sorry, Danny, go ahead, man.
no, but I was just gonna say it's kind of like just I always say, because I'm very religious as well, and like you said, not to kind of make that the topic, but I always say we're dealt with cards, and it's up to us how we use them, but it's not really our control in a sense. Like I hear this a lot. Like we can control what we control, what we can control, and what we can't. We just got to kind of deal with it. So
it's faith. Faith is not seen, it's not tasted, it's not touched. I haven't always had it. I have way more now than I ever have, and I trust that when things in this world right in front of you, they don't seem to be what you want them to be. It's not necessarily that that's the case. It's more a case of it's just not time yet. Like he may need you to experience some more of what appears to be negative before you're ready. So just got to trust it. That's what faith is.
We always talk about trust the process, and we talk about God having a plan for all of us. And I just have to put that in there. And I always say this to people: patience is a virtue, God has a plan, but also at the same time, everything unfolds as it should. And I think that's really something that a lot of people need to hear and take into.
Yeah, hell yeah. Just to get us out of that religious thing.
Yeah.
I'll say the word hell.
All right. Yeah, Danny.
all right. Actually, Michael, I was gonna let you start off with what you wanted to start off with.
Sure. All right. So I will say this, sir. You were trained by the one and only, one of the greats, WWE Hall of Famer, Harley Race. We're talking NWA with Flair. We're talking Junkyard Dog King, Harley Race, WrestleMania 3. I wanted to talk about Harley just because he was a tough son of a gun, very old school values, man could kick ass and take names, but he had such a larger than life character. And really, from every time that he made his moment count, from every time he walked out the curtain to the ring, some of my favorite moments of watching him with my dad was Harley Race and Ric Flair. So I want to ask you, what was some of the stuff that you got to learn from Harley, God rest his soul, and really getting to see the man that is king in action?
Well, first and foremost, yeah, rest in peace. God bless Harley. He was a great man, a great pro wrestler. The stories, it's like the legend outlives the man for sure. I think it was Flair on Joe Rogan's podcast recently, which is kind of, it's pretty impressive just for him to be on there because it's so mainstream. I mean, to me, Joe Rogan is what Howard Stern was to, my generation as far as where people get their pop culture. So for Flair to be on there and the reverence with which Rick spoke about Harley, it's amazing. And I liken it a little bit to some of the stories I've heard about Haku, as far as just being double tough is just not even the word. And it was the same thing with Harley, like, and just a brass set of nuts on him like that. We just have no problem. I think Flair told a story about him going into a bar, going into bars, and like would put his quarters or coins up on the pool table and just run the pool table, and like, the pool sharks and whatnot. Nobody would screw with Harley. So just a legend in and of himself. I don't want to disappoint here, but I was trained originally by Tony DeVito, and Tony DeVito, man, did he just, it was everything I could have asked for in a trainer. So in no way do I ever want to shortchange Tony, because I was prepared to impress a guy like Harley because of Tony. Tony trained me. I was wrestling already. Harley specifically was the one that got me in front of the people in Japan. Pro Wrestling Noah was the first company that noticed me, and Harley, I developed a relationship with Harley at that point, and started working for Pro Wrestling Noah. So Harley was a huge part of my career. But I don't want to discredit Tony DeVito in any way, because if it was not for Tony, like, Harley wouldn't have noticed me. I would have just been another kid, you know, trying to go to the camp, and Noah wouldn't have noticed me. There was so much Tony DeVito, but both Tony and Harley, man, I still use shit that either one of them was I was fortunate enough to have them share with me, and I still use that stuff to this day.
What's some of the key advices that you got from both Tony and Harley that really stick with you?
So Tony very much was very detail oriented, and I don't want to talk too much inside baseball terminology here. It's difficult, and so this is something that I guess is kind of a twofer, because Harley would probably punch you in the mouth for speaking too much inside baseball. Um, but Tony was so big on the details, and like, don't do things if they don't have a reason. Have a why. Have a why, no matter what you're gonna do, have a why. And whether it's to get over something, or to kind of plant a seed for something you're going to come back to later. But if you can't answer why to yourself, then don't do it, because it's wasted motion, it's wasted time in front of the audience. You're just diluting the message, you're diluting the water, so to speak. Like, you're giving the fans more to digest, and if it's not accomplishing what you want to accomplish, like, you're stacking the deck against yourself. So I hope that makes sense without really going too far into the inside baseball sort of talk.
That makes sense.
Is that a phrase you guys get, the inside baseball?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But there's one specifically that Tony, man, years later, I was working, I wrestled Cody Rhodes on a independent. I think it was Northeast Wrestling. Mike Lombardi.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
I figured that ring a bell for you. And somebody snapped a picture, and one of the first things that DeVito had drilled into my head, and I've never forgotten it, has to do with being in a headlock. And the picture perfectly summed up that, like, you know what? I was listening. And I remember after that match that night, I sent it to him. I texted to him and said, yeah, there's you taught me this in literally in year one. I had known DeVito for less than a year, and still all these years later, I do it. And now when I do seminars and anything, like, I preach the same thing, the same exact thing, but without going into the baseball stuff, I'll just leave it there.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Daniel.
Oh, yeah. So before like we just get into specific companies, from your take, how important are the indies in terms of getting you ready for the big league companies?
There is a definite difference between TV wrestling and independent wrestling. A huge difference. There is, I mean, and that's I'm stating the obvious there.
Yeah.
But you get your seasoning on the indies for sure. And I think that it's something that you don't necessarily want to neglect if you cannot neglect it, because it's old school in the way that back in the day when they were there was less TV wrestling and more just pro wrestling, and then there were the TV shows were, one or two a week, not like it is now. Those house shows and whatnot, you were working for just the house, but you were honing your craft. You were learning how to do this well, and it wasn't perfect. The mistakes were there, and you learned how to ad lib, and you learned how to think on the fly and think on your feet. And these are all things that will come in handy for years and years to come. And there's really not that opportunity in modern day pro wrestling, because in modern day, just about everything's on TV now. You will get some house shows, I think, with WWE. You might get a few with AEW. I think New Japan still does some country towns as they do the loops. I can't say for certain just because I haven't worked for New Japan in a decade, so I don't know. But I know that that's what it was before. I think the indies are imperative, as far as you're never going to fill out a full roster with no indie talent. You can't.
Yeah.
It's not possible, and the quality of product will go down, because I think you need a mix. I think WWE has proven that there are a good number of just top level A1 athletes that, yeah, they can become pretty good pro wrestlers. But not all of them. Being an athlete is, to me, it's very, very important. I think it gets a short end of the stick sometimes with people nowadays, because I think a lot of, I don't know. I just think some people that aren't very good athletes, for whatever reason, find their way in this, and they, I don't know. It just, you see it and you're like, something doesn't look right about that guy. He just, his feet don't match, or I don't know. I spot it a mile away. I don't love it, but it is what it is. I think there's room for everyone, all different styles and types and shapes and sizes. But I certainly think that being a good athlete is going to help. So it's not to say that you need to, I think you have to have a good mix. I think you have to have a good mix. And that includes, top college athletes. That includes, people who, Robert Stones, guys who just have this personality that you can't keep a lid on. And then you need the indie guys, the guys that are willing to grind. And this business is founded upon grinders. you know, people that, yeah, I want to wrestle 5 days a week.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael.
I think when, like Bobby just said here, the balance is key of anything. It's not just getting yourself fitness internally and externally. It's the mindset, it's the constant grind, working upon the independent scene, getting you into the professional wrestling business, no matter what company. I think for you, and I'll ask you this, Bobby, isn't it amazing just to see, as far as the influx and evolution, dare I say, revolution of professional wrestling, how we're seeing a lot of female promotion. We're seeing more promotions just getting out there for people to learn and really absorb this, just really the landscape of what goes into professional wrestling and the subtleties, intricacies, and nuances. Like Danny brought up the indies. How awesome is it to see all these promotions just being started up in many different areas that may have not had an independent professional wrestling school before?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good and I think it's bad. I think there's two ways of you see, I think today there's a lot of push pull with the two of them, and part of it, I think, the dirt sheets suck.
Yeah.
And the appetite for the dirt sheets suck. And the fact that, you know, some of these I don't know, pro wrestling journalists or media, like that they have, these jobs have been created for them and they prey upon it. At the end of the day, like, for the most part, we're talking fiction,
Yeah.
but the performers, we're real people. So when the audience is so um has such an appetite to know the things that they perceive they're not supposed to know, as opposed to what pro wrestling is selling them. Because at the end of the day, that's what made us all fans when we were kids. Like, I believed Hulkamania. You say your prayers, you take your vitamins, blah blah blah. Where nowadays, I think sometimes fans want all the other marks to be the dumb ones, and I'm the one that knows more, and it's like this endless pursuit of that, and it hasn't bred a good environment for the industry. And I think in some ways that's where the negative is. So then you have these dirt sheet writers putting out what is basically fake news.
Yeah.
And then it becomes, within a week's time of making the circuit, it's gospel, and people believe it, and it's burned everyone, you know, and including me. And so I just think that that part of it is shitty, for
Yeah.
sure. But the opportunity that's out there now for people to get involved in this business that they love, and then for the indies to be so healthy again, that's fantastic. I mean, that's awesome, because to me, that's kind of it'll always be the lifeline of the industry from a performer standpoint, but also from a fan standpoint. Think about the stuff that drew you in, whatever WrestleMania moment or whatever it was when you were a kid that really hooked you. Yeah, I mean, you get to watch the spectacle that all of that is at this point. And even like an upstart company like AEW, and they're doing Wembley Stadium. I mean, that doesn't happen without all of the other. I just wish, we could leave some of the bullshit on the side of the road where it should be left.
Yeah. So with that being said, also just in terms of like you said, there's a lot of opportunity out there, and we see it with Ring of Honor now, where a lot of
Mhm.
independent talent are getting spotlighted. Um, would you say that from what Ring of Honor was back then to what it is now, you think it still keeps the same morals in terms of just spotlighting talent and making them bigger than what they were before?
I don't know because I don't work for the company. I have a very I have a fondness for Ring of Honor as a product, period. It was something that, Tony DeVito was working for Ring of Honor when I first, got trained and stuff. And so I was paying my dues, going to Ring of Honor shows and watching guys like Low Ki and Samoa Joe. Samoa Joe was the thing that inspired me to, like, oh wow, I can bring my martial arts into pro wrestling. Like, this is him and Kenta, because I was working for Noah at that time. And I started to see, like, Kenta and Samoa Joe were two guys that just made me realize, like, okay, the create a character wrestler that I made on No Mercy and all those other Nintendo or whatever games, like, I can be that. I can
Yeah.
do that. So Ring of Honor will always have that place for me. And I, on the come up, was, had a couple flirtations with Ring of Honor, but nothing really stuck. And then it finally did when Hunter Johnston hired me. And it was Hunter Delirious's idea to put Kyle and I together as a tag team. And that, my career would not be the same without it. And he's one of my best friends still to this day. So yeah, Ring of Honor has a special place for me, and it always will. I love the fact that it was I don't know what was happening with it. Nobody really does, but Tony bought it and he's doing something with it. And if not for that, who knows where it would have ended up. So for that, I'm grateful. And yeah, I mean, I'm interested in seeing what plans will play out into the future for Ring of Honor.
Thank you, Mike.
I would just like to say, since he brought up Kenta during around that time, and you mentioned Pro Wrestling Noah, for those who've not seen Bryan Danielson versus Kenta from around that time in Pro Wrestling Noah, it is a gem. Go out of your way and search for it. And like you mentioned, Samoa Joe and Kenta Kobashi, and Kenta and himself, you can't beat it. But I just wanted to ask you another tie into Ring of Honor here, Bobby. What I love about the fact of it's too, like, Ring of Honor has so many evolutions, and what we see now with Tony Khan. First of all, you and Kyle, badass music, as far as I'll Give You a Reason, still one of my favorite themes from the side of things. But also what I loved about the two of you, especially in Ring of Honor, like we mentioned the Briscoes, we mentioned guys like Caprice and Cedric, we mentioned Rhett Titus, we mentioned so many tag teams that you got to work with. I think for you, it's got to feel good because when people think of like the echelon of what tag team wrestling is when it came into Ring of Honor and pro wrestling, you and Kyle just nailed it from that, and especially New Japan, the interactions with Adam Cole and the Kingdom. Like, you guys have always just had such a great storytelling, being like kind of joined at the hip, and just really made for such a brotherhood that is such a great camaraderie to see in pro wrestling.
Yeah, I mean, Kyle and I had known each other previously. We wrestled against each other a few times. Gabe Sapolsky actually booked us when he was starting Evolve, and we were the first match. And I remember having a lengthy conversation with Gabe about the spirit of what he wanted Evolve to be was very much the presentation that Kyle and I had. And it was like, similar to Low Ki and Samoa Joe. And it was a very martial arts infused style of pro wrestling. The UFC wasn't quite what it is today, but it was a little bit of a hybrid, had a very shoot fighting sort of feel to it. And that's exactly what we were going for. So when we got a chance to tag together and we put slapped a name on it, that's pretty much was the growing process of Kyle and I. We would have probably both done that style on our own because we were and would have continued to, but I don't think, I think the synergy that came from him and I being together, it took both of our games to different levels, because now I think it bolstered our confidence, because All I needed was his like nod on something, and I was like, all right, well, fuck it, I'm going for it. And same thing with him. So we became we stopped asking for permission and asked for forgiveness, and I think it just helped us both immensely, and we were able to not only present in the ring the style that we wanted to present, but we were very fortunate in that Hunter paired us up with the American Wolves, and he built a storyline around it that would create, position them as the sympathetic babyface, because and give Eddie and Davey a reason to tag again, because they weren't. And the buildings that we were in, like, everybody loved the American Wolves. So by default, people hated Red Dragon. So getting heat was so easy that once we were already getting heat, then we could get creative, and we just started being goofballs. And again, similar to Robert Stone, like, we were given enough leash and license to wear the egg on our face a lot of times. And, at the end of the day, that's a lost art when you're a heel.
I think what's great about it too is as well, and I have to add, because you talk about being the goofballs and stuff, I got to say one of my favorite part of your entrance, and we'll just skip the WWE here for as an aside, but I got to say every time you guys were the NXT Tag Team Champions and Kyle does the air guitar and just playing the guitar, I think what's great about it too as well, we talk about kids emulating what we see. There's somebody out there now, every time they think of the NXT Tag Teams, they're going to think about Kyle just rocking it out with the guitar like he's playing an episode of Guitar Hero. Like, I love that. Like, we talk about subtleties, intricacies, and nuances. That adds more to Kyle, but it also adds to the importance of the characters and the importance that those championships hold.
100%, 100%. And people, like, when we didn't have the titles, like, they were up in arms over it. Not for any reason other than that they didn't get to watch Kyle play the air guitar or the belt guitar, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, Danny.
So you've had in your career plenty of debuts. Do you have a specific favorite? I mean, you've debuted obviously for WWE, AEW, you've made an appearance on MLW, you have Ring of Honor briefly, Pro Wrestling Noah, New Japan. Do you have any favorite debut out of all of the many that you've had?
Favorite debuts, I'm gonna have to say, because officially it would have been Takeover Brooklyn when we hit WWE TV. And I think at that time, for the three of us, knowing that they were going to go with something, we weren't sure, we were still fleshing it out, but something that included the three of us together, and the nerves associated with okay, this is WWE, and this is a packed pay-per-view arena, and we're coming out and we're jumping like established, well-known people: Drew McIntyre, Eric Young, Damo, Wolf. Like, we're doing something here. What if they don't know us? Like, what if they're like, well, who the fuck are these guys? So you have that doubt. And I remember fondly, like, being crouched down. I don't remember where we were waiting for our cue, but it was me and Kyle was right in front of me, and he keeps looking back and I'm looking forward, and it was dark, and a couple times we caught each other, and we're both obviously nerves, stress level at a 10. But when we ran out in the arena, like, you know what you're there to do, how to do what you're about to do. So the nerves kind of go away once you start your approach. And our approach, they weren't, nobody knew. And then when we hit the ring, we followed through with what we were doing. And then you're in the physicality, and the physicality is just, it's my favorite part, and it'll never not be. So I go into a bit of a zone at that point. So I'm not even really noticing the crowd, but it felt right. It felt good. Everything, boom, boom, boom. But the next part of it is where I think we got confirmation that they knew exactly who we were, was when we did the jump on McIntyre, and then Adam was part of it. And then at the end, we walk up the ramp, and then Adam Cole, baby, and the arena returned it. You know, they knew, they took the words from us, and so it was like, okay, wow, like they know exactly who we are, and
What
that was cool.
was that, like a sigh of relief right there when they're like, when you got the reaction from the crowd up in the ramps? When you look,
Yeah, I mean, the first one when Kyle and I came out, like I said, it was really kind of a blur, but it felt good. And when it feels that good, you just kind of trust it. But each and every time, you still get nervous. And then the second part felt good too, and it felt like we had done, we did what we needed to do, and then we're coming up the ramp, and just that part of it. And I'm pretty sure Adam was very. There was some anxiety for him too. Like, are they gonna they gonna fart on this or what? And the reaction was, it was electric, and I'll never forget hearing that come back at us. And yeah, so it was confirmation, and for them to know, yeah, I mean, it was confirmation for all of us. Like, yep, then we know who you are.
so you talked to us about your favorite debut, you have faced the likes with Kyle, you have faced the likes of the Briscoes, the Young Bucks, Homicide, Kingston, Daniels, Kazarian, the Time Splitters. The list goes on and on. Do you have a favorite match that stands out to you?
Um, I've said this on other interviews, so I would love to give you a different one, but this is the one that comes to mind first and foremost. We had a match against AOP in Philadelphia. I believe it was a takeover. And for me, I grew up, WWF was definitely something I watched, but I was an upstate New York kid, so WWF, that was the backyard. But NWA started to be carried on TNT and TBS when I was a kid growing up, and you would get the Atlanta Braves games, and so it was some stuff that, like, our region wasn't, normally privy to. So that was my first exposure to the NWA, and that was like the Crockett years, like, you know I think it was the early 90s, but I could go back and get like late 80s stuff.
Yeah,
And that was the stuff, 88, 89, that just blew my mind. It was like, man, this is real. Like, this is like, I remember it was a Saturday morning and I saw Dusty Rhodes, and they must have been doing a recap of like a Starcade or something, but he was bleeding buckets. And that wasn't the norm at that time. So to see that on a Saturday morning just blew my little, 12-year-old mind, or whatever it was. So all these years later, we're in NXT, and I know Hunter and Shawn Michaels were big fans of the same stuff. And here we are leading off a pay-per-view, and it's me and Kyle, and we are out there with these two big, imposing, and just to cut to the chase, they were the Road Warriors. They were the Legion of Doom, right down to the fact that Paul Ellering was on the outside. He was their manager. And we were Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard.
wow.
And that, to me, I really connected those dots, and I got to live out like what was almost like a childhood fantasy in a way, because I had watched so much of that stuff, and never realized that Arn and Tully were the common thread in the matches I liked, because I always loved tag team wrestling, and I thought like, yeah, I love the Road Warriors, and I love Luger and Wyndham, and I loved it. But no, the common thread was Arn and Tully, and those were the guys. They were the wizard behind the curtain. They were, what I would come to realize is what I appreciated most about those memories.
Real
And we
quick,
got to be that. We got to live that out. That was fucking cool.
yeah. So real quick, you talk about tag teams, and obviously you were in a very very well known tag team. What would you say is the importance of having tag team wrestling, and just the importance of tag teams in the industry in general?
I think it's huge, but I don't think it gets its flowers, so to speak. Because at the end of the day, this will always be storytelling. The moves, they change, and the degree of difficulty gets pushed every year, every couple years, whatever. Even to the point where there's ultra violent is a style, and I don't know, it's not my cup of tea, but it is what it is. It's got a place, I suppose. But I just think that with it being storytelling, one-on-one, you can only tell it for so long before you want add a little spice. And a tag team match, 6-man, I don't think they all need to be different, but some variety is a good thing. And there's a totally different psychology that can be told, and a total story that can be told differently with a tag match. So I've always had a fondness for tag team wrestling. And I think that was, for me as a fan at a time when, we didn't know so much about behind the curtain, and I'm glad we didn't. And I just remember there were stories that were told in some of these tag matches where I now look back and know, like, okay, yeah, they did the cutoff here, and then the hot tag was what I was waiting for, and blah blah blah. And it's like, that to me is part of what I don't like about how much of the wrestling business has just been like pushed out there and in front of the curtain instead of behind it. I think tag team wrestling can headline a pay-per-view. I think it can be. I mean, they did it with WrestleMania this year, and the story was enough with Sammy and Kevin and the Usos. That proves it to me. I think, and I thought this for a long time when I was the year I was with AEW. You had all these tag teams. You had I was there, and I was hoping Kyle would be coming in. And if not, like I felt like, okay, well, me and Adam, people know the history there, but especially once Kyle came in. And the Briscoes were, floating around. We didn't know, but something maybe. And the Bucks, obviously, we have this huge history. Just all these different teams. And I thought, like, man, this is the time to do a Crockett Cup pay-per-view. This is the time. It's all tags. And I thought that in particular, the AEW fan base would eat it up. And it would be a challenge to the boys, to the tag teams, to be able to look at it and go, okay, we're doing a pay-per-view full of tags. They can't all be the same. So like, we're really going to have to go out there and work. I think there was just some money left on the table not doing that, but who am I? It's not my company. And, if someday I have a company, I'll do a Crockett Cup. I think tag team wrestling is needed. I think it's a integral part.
Thank you.
I have to agree with him on that. First and foremost, I know we saw a lot with the focal points back in the day, especially when the Dusty Rhodes Classic started up, and we saw the Mae Young Classic and we saw the Cruiserweight Classic. I think that's a nice influx. Like you talk about tag team wrestling, like you look at some of the legendary teams, and I'll include yourself in this, Bobby. You look at the Bulldogs, you look like you mentioned Arn and Tully, you look at the Road Warriors, you look at the Legion of Doom, you look at so many influxes there that are larger than life. But like you talk about, there's a balance with everything. So you may have high octane aerial assault over here, then you got these powerhouses. I think much like we talk about how not everything has to be chocolate and vanilla. You can let's throw some Neapolitan in there. Let's put something in there for everybody. So I think the influx of tag team wrestling, especially what we're seeing now coming up in various promotions and especially the indies as well. I think it's a nice mix. And I think a lot of people who listen to this and a lot of people that we get to see, I think a Crockett Cup is very much well needed. I have to just add to that point.
Yeah, I don't think it gets I don't think tag team wrestling gets the fanfare it deserves, because I think there's way more fans of tag team wrestling. I think it's way more pro tag team than it is anti. Like even the one, people who are like, no, I like the heavyweight championship matches, or I like the big matches. Like they still like tag team wrestling. Nobody doesn't like tag team. Like if you don't like tag team wrestling, lose my number. We can't
Yeah,
be friends.
I agree. Michael, go ahead.
So you did mention AEW there, and I'm gonna say I'm sure a lot of fans as well loved it. Like the fact that you got to wrestle, he was a staple in WWE, Ring of Honor as well. Like you and Punk got in there, and the strikes and the kicks that you guys were doing in that match. I wanted to ask you about working with Punk in this stage of AEW, because Punk has really just gotten back into wrestling. Very polarizing figure, but god dang it, man, the dude knows how to tell the story, and he has absorbed a lot, much like yourself. I wanted to ask you about working with CM Punk and AEW and the overall connection that you two had there, because it was a great match to see.
Yeah, I mean, when I came up in Ring of Honor, like I said, Tony DeVito was working there in that time frame. Like Punk was finding himself. Um, Samoa Joe was somebody who stuck out very much to me. And when I was in AEW at that point, they kind of hadn't figured out exactly what they were doing. With us as a potential group. Like Adam still had something going on. So I really didn't know. What I was hoping to be was just kind of like this hired gun, so to speak, just a guy that, I'll do what needs to be done. I was most looking forward to working with Bryan Danielson again. Bryan and I had some history from way back. As far as the match with Punk, like I, he's never been my flavor really. So I wasn't excited or disappointed to work with him. It just kind of was what it was, and yeah. To be honest, Danielson was the match that, like, because I knew that was on the horizon. That was the one that really creatively kept me up at night. Thinking of, okay, well, we could do this, we could do that, and yeah, I don't. The Punk one was kind of take it or leave it for me.
Understood. And I'll add to the Danielson part. I mean, we got to see him recently against Okada. They brought back the Final Countdown, which is synonymous with the Ring of Honor days.
Yeah.
And for you, I mean, I've seen a lot of the work as well, and I'm sure Danny has too. I think when you look at someone like Bryan Danielson, one of the most unsung heroes of professional wrestling, I mean, from his tenure in Ring of Honor, WWE, now in AEW, the man just constantly evolves. He always stuck to it throughout the injuries and everything. I think that's someone a lot of people will be role models for who get into the business, because the man just keeps going and going and going. He's like the Energizer Bunny.
Yeah, I think there was kind of a little bit of a common thread when it came to martial arts influenced at that time for all of us on the come up, and somebody made a comparison of Kenta to the Dynamite Kid as far as his influence, and I would agree wholeheartedly that the way that Dynamite inspired so many people, and there were so many smaller guys that looked at Dynamite and were like, man, I can do this sort of thing. I think that from a martial arts standpoint, you had Kenta kind of pioneering that. And I think Danielson, there was inspiration there for Danielson and vice versa. I would imagine, because I don't know who came first, Kenta or Brian Danielson. They were both kind of around similar times. And even though I'm older than both of them, I got a later start in pro wrestling. So it was guys like Brian and, like I said, Kenta very much. Kenta and Samoa Joe were admittedly the biggest influences I had coming up as an independent guy. But Brian wasn't far behind. And I'll be honest, and the common thread there was that, okay, these are people that train martial arts. Pro wrestling is what it is, but these are actual martial artists. And, you can say that I take it too serious or somebody else said, but being a martial artist it's for me, it's a lifelong thing, and I don't take it lightly. It's one thing to kind of put it out there, but I don't know, if the repetitions aren't there, like I see it, and your technique is not there, like, don't lie to me, don't bullshit me. If you fight, if you train, cool. If you don't, that's cool too, but don't tell me you do if you don't.
Yeah.
And I think that for guys like that, I think, like, you look at Brian Danielson, the man trains. You look at Kenta, the man trains. You look at Samoa Joe, the man trains. You look at Kyle O'Reilly, the man trains. Like, the list goes on and on and on, even Davey Richards, like the guy, he trains. You can't, love him or hate him. Like, you can't look at him and go like, oh, well, he doesn't know what he's doing. Like, no, he does. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Go ahead, Michael.
I got to say, what I love about how he mentioned there, it's like we talk about, and one of the quotes that I'm really big into is life is an art form and we're all applying our crafts. Let's just do it in an amazing fashion. Like he mentioned there, when it comes to mixed martial arts and martial arts as a whole, it's about the technique. It's how you throw the kick, the angle, the trajectory, if you will. There's a mechanic in science really to anything that goes into any art or craft there, whatever endeavor that we pursue. So I can see why, Bobby, like, you're very serious about that, as you should with a lot of the stuff. You want to apply and hone your craft to the best of your abilities and really go out there and just elicit reactions and evoke emotion. So I think that goes into everything that we do.
When I go out and I pro wrestle, because I lead with so much martial arts, the one thing I think about is I want a person who knows, a person who trains, a person who's got, whatever I want a Dwayne Ludwig. I want a Boss Rutan. I want a TJ Dillashaw. If they're not fans of pro wrestling, but if for some reason they were to happen upon a match that I was in, I would want them to be able to look at it and go, well, that guy trains.
Yeah.
I know it's pro wrestling, but he obviously trains. And if that's not obvious, then I'm not doing my job, and like I said, like, long after I stop pro wrestling, I'll still be doing martial arts. So,
kind of moving on to a different subject or a different topic per se. At this stage of your career, do you feel like you still have a lot left? I know you're back on the independents. Are you kind of still going at full speed, or you're kind of watching and picking and choosing where you're going to go in terms of the indies?
I'm picking and choosing because I've been fortunate enough to have a good career where I don't have to work every offer that's out there. I do like to stay busy because, surprisingly enough, I still kind of love it in a way. I do feel like after doing the boxing match that I did in November, like, I've always seen a difference between pro wrestling and competition, like pure competition.
Yeah.
But there was a time early in my pro wrestling career where I feel like the itch I was scratching was the same, or at least very, very similar. Where now, all these years later, 20 some odd years into pro wrestling, I feel like that itch is is distinctly different. And after doing the boxing match in Dubai, it reminded me of like, wow, I would like to compete a few more times. And I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I still enjoy and love pro wrestling. So I'm going to continue to do it. I don't have any plans on stopping anytime soon, but I would like to fight a couple more times at least before I hang it up.
Yeah. Just talking about boxing, I think Michael has a question.
Oh yeah, we got to get into this because I did see the boxing bout. First of all, congrats, man, because that was a great.
Thank you, sir.
You're very
Thank
welcome.
you. Yeah.
I love that. And what I love about it too is as well, and there's such an influx of many different talents and athletes. Like you look at back in the 90s when you had Ken Shamrock and guys like Tank Abbott go to WWF and WCW respectively. Look at with Ronda and Shayna now, women, mixed martial arts, the influx with boxing as well. I think it's great because first of all, saw the fight, badass fight. We mentioned that you killed it and you won. Congrats. But god dang it, man. It really does show, like we mentioned, the technique side of things. You put in a great fight, and I think a lot of people will get to see just how skilled you are. I know there was a video out of you and Malachi Black training that really came out, really resurfaced. But god dang it, man, it was a good fight. I just can't say nothing but more congrats to you, sir.
Well, I appreciate it, and it's like it's a lifelong pursuit. Martial arts. I mean, I can remember starting Taekwondo as a kid, and then the first time somebody held boxing mitts in front of me and asked me to punch them, I threw a reverse punch, because it's all I knew. So I had to learn how to throw a jab and a cross and a hook. And then I learned some boxing, and then I continued to pursue all of that stuff. And it's like, you just keep adding tools to the toolbox. And like I said, I will train martial arts in some form or fashion until the day I leave this earth. It's very much a happy place for me. I think anybody who's shared a pro wrestling locker room with me could attest to the fact that, like, when I am preparing to go out for a match, like I will shadow box for an hour. It really is sort of a meditative sort of thing for me. And it's not like I'm in a trance. I mean, you can interrupt me and I'll call my name. Like I'll say something to you, I'll respond. But
You're fine.
I feel very much at home linking together combinations. And I'll say now at this point in my career, those combinations and stuff that have endlessly provided me with an outlet for my creativity. And I think they have for other martial artists, like Dwayne Ludwig specifically has developed a striking system called Bang Muay Thai, which is just a series of combinations, and it really is just brilliant stuff. But I will say at this point in my pro wrestling career, what I have learned from that system and these combinations is there's things that can be borrowed and things that can't, and things that need to be modified to fit the pro wrestling prototype. And I feel like I've developed a little bit of my own sort of system that works specifically for pro wrestling. And that to me is something that I'm really pretty excited about sharing with people, because I have this unique odd set of skills. A traditional martial artist knows how to do this stuff and knows how to do it in a way that can cause serious harm. And do I have some of that? Yes. But then I also have this really odd ability to make it, without going inside baseball, I have this odd ability to make it palatable for pro wrestling.
Fair enough.
And that's something I would like to share with people.
course. And I mean, for you, I mean, the other thing I just wanted to add to that, I mean, we see so many influxes of MMA, boxing, and wrestling, like everything incorporated with your style and many others. I think for you, which I thought was also very cool just to see where he's come from, you look at guys like Pat McAfee, who came from the football world, though his thing is ring announcing, and you guys had an amazing War Games match with Team McAfee and Team Undisputed Era. And what are the influx of working with Pat and just really coming into that whole fruition there?
Pat was awesome. I've not known too many people that came into pro wrestling from that, like whatever you want to call it, like the celebrity or
Yeah, the
whatever realm. But Pat came in very humble, was an easy person to get along with. He was funny, he was engaging. I liked Pat, man. I dare I say, like I loved working with Pat. Pat came, took it serious, still had fun, but was serious about it being well done. And that's all I can ask for. So yeah, I got nothing but A plus pluses for Pat McAfee.
Agreed. And I gotta say, for those who have not checked out the feud, you should check out the War Games because you two had a hell of a one. Just many dives and many chemistry. Like it was really good. Probably one of my favorite War Games.
Cool. Yeah, all the war games were a blast.
That's the thing. You incorporate what you saw from WCW, take it into WWE, and just have that mix. Again, the importance of just the matches and everything that goes into it. So yeah, that's all I just wanted to add. Go ahead, Danny.
Yeah.
So with all the knowledge you have gained and picked up throughout your career, with you doing these seminars, how important are seminars to you with dropping knowledge on the younger generations and anyone willing to learn?
I will say that recently, like over the last 2 years, I have found such a reward for myself in that I guess I didn't anticipate, because pro wrestling, you got to be pretty selfish in some ways, and I didn't know that I would take joy from watching others figure things out and then potentially take it on in with them in their future career. And my wife, actually, because my wife is a teacher, and my wife was the one that kind of pointed it out to me, and that it would be, to be careful because I might like it. And then a couple of those instances came to be, and I did. And I guess I was, because I played football in college, and I coached for 1 year because I didn't know what else I was going to do, but I was done playing, and I coached, and I didn't really like it. I didn't really like coaching football. I realized, like, I liked playing football, but not necessarily coaching it. So I was worried that it might be the same, and it wasn't. And that was a happy surprise that, like, I really did enjoy. So now, like, I love doing these seminars. I try to book as many as I can. I have one coming up in September for House of Champions in Orlando, Florida. And then I have a few more booked. I love doing them, man. I really do. It depends on the level that comes as far as what we can get into and what we can't. But I love to share what I've picked up over, 23 years or however long it's been. And I've wrestled everywhere between New Japan and WWE and Ring of Honor and AEW. And I've really checked all the boxes I could want to check. So I feel like now, I like playing that forward, because God knows there were a lot that played it forward for me.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, just for anyone listening, if you see a seminar for Bobby in your area, I would say definitely go. I mean, who better to learn from than Bobby himself? So
Well, specifically, I think, and like I said, I've developed this little bit of a system and a belief when it comes to my pro wrestling and the importance of well done striking. And that's not to say that you have to be a strike heavy pro wrestler to benefit from it. I think that properly done striking and it can be just one or two things, not to get too far into my theory on this, but it aids you in pro wrestling in a lot of ways that really, until you start to scratch the surface, won't even make sense to you. But believe me, the art of it requires you to do that well, to get to maybe the other things that you want to focus on, or that you want to, it's, again, I'm avoiding the inside baseball terminology, but I
Yeah,
feel like my mark that I'd love to leave on this business is specifically like better striking in pro wrestling, because there's a void sometimes. There's a it's an art, and some people do it well and some people don't. And the ones that don't do it well need to learn how to do it well, or just stop attempting it altogether.
agree. Before we wrap up here, Michael, any questions?
I gotta say, we did cover a lot of the wrestling promotions here, but I gotta say, for the short tenure that you had in Impact Wrestling this last go around, I did enjoy the stuff that you did with Josh Alexander, and it was great to see you as a part of that locker room. Because when you think Impact Wrestling from its inception in 2002, a lot of people say what they will about it over the years, but you can't deny over 21 years now, Impact has really been going full throttle, and they brought you in as well. And I saw your match with Josh Alexander, walking weapon, collegiate athlete, tag teamed in the North with Ethan Page, former Impact World Champion. And for you, what was that like working with Josh? Because Josh is another one, for those who have not seen him, really on the rise in his own right.
Working with Josh, like, I was looking forward to it from the moment I knew it was going to happen. He and I wrestled when we were in when Kyle and I were tagging in Ring of Honor, and him and Ethan Page came in. They weren't there long, but they came in for a couple of shots, and we were fortunate enough to wrestle them at least once, maybe twice, and the chemistry was there with both of them. So I knew it would be there with Josh, and I enjoyed it just because I like what he does. I like his style. There's not a lot of daylight in his work, we'll say. And I like to think of mine as the same. I didn't get into pro wrestling all the way back in 2001 or whenever it was, to go out and dance. Like, I like to hit people, and I like to get hit. Um, there's a measure of balance that needs to be in play, but, like, come on, man, we're men. Let's go out and at the very least pretend to be fucking men.
Exactly, and tear it up. And
Yeah.
the only thing I'll other add to that, man, I gotta say, first and foremost, like with any professional wrestler and many of the greats that get into it, I gotta say your dedication, your passion, and just your overall love of professional wrestling does not go unnoticed. And really, all I could say is thank you for what you've done for pro wrestling, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate it, man. I mean, those were the guys that really um kind of lit my fire when I was a fan, when I was a kid. I mentioned a few of them throughout this interview, but it was guys like Eddie Guerrero and the Dynamite Kid, and uh the Great Muda. I mean, how could I not? He's my hands down favorite wrestler ever. I mean, just guys that, yeah, they took pride in our business. Arn and Tully, guys that yeah, they're the workers. I was part of what I loved about our run in NXT is that, three of my friends and myself, we were considered the workhorses of that time in that company, and that's exactly who we wanted to be. With the four of us individually, like, we wanted to be workhorses. Use us. I'll wrestle 10 times a night, and that's what we wanted to be, and that's what they were willing to let us be. So yeah, very cool.
Think like your theme song once said, "You guys shocked the system." That up.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, go ahead, Danny.
As we come, oh, as we come to a wrap here, there's one question that we like to ask every guest before we wrap up, and it's my favorite part of the
Okay.
entire interview. If you had the intention of, yeah, if you had the attention of the entire world for 5 minutes, and you had to give them one piece of advice, what would it be?
Because I am a card carrying Hulkamaniac, would actually be three pieces of advice: to say your prayers, eat your vitamins. I think I'm forgetting the other one. Say your prayers, eat your vitamins. What's the third one?
There's say your prayers, eat your vitamins. No, it's just say your prayers, eat your vitamins. Yeah, say your prayers, eat your vitamins.
Yeah, but I think there was a third. I think that, oh my God, Frank Ferraro is going to kill me. I'm a card carrying.
Let's say your prayers, take your vitamin. I was about to say eat your vegetables, but I'm like, what is he friggin' Popeye? No.
I am vegan, so
Hey.
let's say it that way. Say
All
your
right.
prayers, eat your vegetables, and take your vitamins.
Fair enough. All right. Excellent.
Yeah.
Awesome. This has been episode 10. It was an honor to have you on, especially as our
Thank
10th
you.
guest. We are growing and to have you come on and speak to us and give us time out of your day. We really, really do appreciate it.
Of course, gentlemen. Thank you. I appreciate you having me on. If you're looking for Bobby Fish merchandise and apparel, go to bobbyfishapparel.com. You can follow me on Instagram or Twitter at the Bobby Fish. Tune in to my podcast, the Undisputed Podcast with Bobby Fish. We are on all your podcast platforms. I think that's Spotify, iHeartRadio, all the goods. I'm told it's every place that you get your podcast, so whatever that means. But yeah, please tune in. We have a blast doing it. We are quite across the board. I mean, we do a lot of wrestling talk, obviously. But there's some MMA in there. You never know who's going to pop up. We had Kenny Florian on. We had Rampage Jackson. We had Karrion Kross recently. We had Malachi Black. We had, Scotty 2 Hotty. We really, we try to keep a good variety moving. So tune in, check us out. We are on YouTube with that. We are also on TikTok. I should have the handles of those, but I don't because I'm bad at my job.
We'll put the
in the
links down.
description. Yeah.
Okay. Look in the description. They'll be there.
Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this has been episode 10. I am Danny Harrell with my co-host,
Mike Larkin.
and today we had the one, the only, Bobby Fish. This is us signing off from episode 10, and we'll see you next time.